what's going on in a lot of sun dances today really is not correct. Because there's a lot of foundation that has to be there before that ceremony can happen. And these criteria are not being met. When you do a ceremony, it doesn't matter what tribe it is or what your religion is. What's important is that you keep humble. In ours, there may be humor too, which is okay. But what is not okay is machismo, when people are macho and they're doing the ceremony to show off, because then it's selfish. They've brought a selfish energy to the ceremony, and they are doing it to impress somebody. And they're using it as a way to achieve status. Like, this makes you better. Like, this makes you more sacred. And this is not correct. That's not even true. And that is coming from linear thinking. And what is linear thinking? Linear thinking, just think of the word linear. The word line is in it, L-I-N-E. And when you draw a line, normally you just go in one direction. And that's how this thinking is. It only goes forward. And the thinking is that the more forward you go, the better you are. That is unhealthy thinking, because people who think like this are trying to be better than one another. Now, I can understand an innocent challenge when people, challenge each other, but there's a healthy way to do it, and there's also an unhealthy way. The unhealthy way is when they say, well, hey, I'm better than you. And this is when somebody is trying to rise above others, so they think they are better. And that's oppression that separates everything into two categories, and that is duality. Nature is not like that. Yeah? Nature doesn't do these kind of things. And the earth doesn't see it this way either. So in this kind of thinking, people go into ceremonies and they'll say, for example, sometimes people will go into a sweat lodge ceremony and they'll say, make it as hot as possible. Because they feel that the more they suffer, the more good things will happen to them. That sounds Catholic to me, which is linear thinking too. Because this is not correct thinking. Some people will say, okay, today it'll be a certain heat, then tomorrow I'll make it a little bit hotter, and every day I'll make it a little bit hotter and hotter and hotter till eventually I melt and evaporate. Is that the goal? You see what I mean? That's silly. Childish thinking. So, the reality is some days we feel stronger than other days. So, in the days that we feel stronger, those should be the days where we can withstand more heat. But there's some days that we can't, so we should lessen it. There's no problem with that. The most important thing is that you're doing your best each day. But that shouldn't be increasing every day, because that's linear thinking. When somebody says, yeah, increase it a little bit more, that doesn't always work. In fact, it doesn't work. In the end, it does not work. So when you go into ceremonies, you're supposed to be humble. And the participants of the ceremony become the servants of the audience. They're the servants to the people. But that thinking is not there today. A lot of these young guys, when they do this to rise above others. That's linear thinking. The true sun dancers that humble themselves and they serve people and they stay out of the limelight because they're humble. And they don't talk about it. They don't put this on their Facebook profile because that's vanity. This is really a violation, because to live like that, you're supposed to be humble, which means nobody is supposed to know that that's what you do. The only people that need to know are your friends and family and the Togashilapi. These are the ancient ones. It's nobody else's business, and it shouldn't be talked about in public either, because it's sacred. But when you put it on your Facebook profile, you're violating that sanctity. You're not humble. You're vain. You're full of shit when you do things like that. You're not a man when you do things like that. You're a coward, because you need outside validation. You need somebody to tell you, gee, you're good, because you don't feel good. You need people to put you in a spotlight, to put you on a pedestal. That's duality. That is unhealthy. That's not the Lakota way. It's not the human way. Because you're trying to rise above others. Leaders, real leaders of the people, are their servants. They see themselves as servants. Sitting Bull never saw himself as above his people. He saw himself as a servant for them. This is why he tended even to their spiritual needs, because he was their servant. That's why he was so widely respected. And when he spoke, he had that power of compassion that made you want to listen. He earned it because he was humble. He didn't walk around saying he was a pipe carrier and sun dancer. He never said that, because he was humble. So a lot of sun dancers today, they're not humble. Reality begins within. This is the basic Lakota Star Knowledge concept. And the humility must begin within. You have to be humble yourself. You have to humble yourself. That's the first criteria that has to be met. And that's not being met today. The second criteria, your hair has to be long. That's incredibly important. The sun dance is part of our culture, and our culture demands that you have long hair, because the essence of your soul is in your hair. The only time you cut your hair, you don't cut all of it. You put both your hands behind your hair, put all your hair on your back, okay? With your hands, you divide it in equally two, as close as you can. Don't count, yeah? But just grab it so it feels even, and then you let go of one half, and then you get a scissor or a knife, and then you cut the half that you're holding, so only half of your hair is cut. You do this when somebody close to you has died, somebody that you dearly love. And so when people see that only half your hair is long, they know that you are in mourning, and they respect you, and they know how to communicate to you. So they won't go over and tell you some kind of a snagging joke, because you're in mourning. That's the signal to others that you're in mourning. People don't do that today. What people do today is they go to the hairdresser and they say, give me a short haircut. I'm in mourning, so I need to have a short haircut. I want it to look good. See, that's vanity. That's where they level everything off. How are you supposed to know they're in mourning? Maybe they just got a short haircut. You see what I mean? It's supposed to be half the hair, not all of it. That's the only time you cut your hair. Until then, you don't. This is really important. It's part of your soul. That's why when people die, the hair is really involved in this ceremony called Nariguluha, where they cut a lock of hair from the dead person, and somebody from the family is chosen to watch over it for 1 year, and they build a lodge for it. So during that year, people that it knows can come and talk to it. Because even though that person's dead and the soul is journeying on, there's still a connection to that soul in the hair. That's why the hair is sacred. So people will come to that lodge and they can come there anytime and talk to that hair as if that person's really there, because it is, in a way. It's like a telephone call, a spiritual telephone call. So the people can tell them, if they didn't get a chance to say I'm sorry or for something unresolved, they can resolve it at that point and come to peace with it. Or just say, I really miss you. It's really hard to live without you. This is a way of expressing grief. This is really important. Any emotion that's unresolved has to be expressed in there. That way, healing can happen. Even anger. You express anger without hurting anybody or anything, including yourself. That's how you do it constructively. And sometimes with the help of somebody to guide you through it. So they do that for a year. And by that time, that year is over, people are ready to move on now. There's a false belief that people think that when you cry for somebody who's dead, that traps them on the earth. That's false. Absolutely not. You have no way to control a soul. Absolutely none. So your crying doesn't do that. Your crying is blocking you from passing through the grieving if you cry too much. It doesn't do anything to the soul of the person that died. Okay? So I need to straighten that out too. So, after a year, then they have the closing part of the ceremony, which is very beautiful, where they bring the mourners in and the community sits around them in a circle, and then people in the community come and they wash the faces of the mourners and they comb their hair and they give them a cup of water to drink, and then a heoka comes in and starts doing things to make them laugh. He's putting medicine into them now. The year of mourning is over. Now they can laugh. Laughter is medicine, not sets things in balance again. It's a really beautiful ceremony. Today they don't do that either. They just do that last part and they call it wiping the tears. That's really incomplete. Why do they just do that last part? Because in the beginning of the reservation, we were brainwashed by the priests. We were denied healthy food, our language was made illegal, our ceremonies were made illegal, so we became weak-minded. And so the priests were very controlling and they took advantage of this. This is the same condition that terrorists and cult leaders and missionaries bring to their new recruits. They deprive them of things so that they can control their minds. When they deprive somebody of something he needs, he becomes weak-minded and they can control him. And that's what happened. And the priest said this ceremony is bad. But to keep the Indians in church, they would say, but this last part is okay. So that's why today people only do this wiping the tears. They don't do that cutting the hair thing anymore. Because the priest said that contradicts the Bible. So anything that contradicts the Bible comes from the devil. You see what I mean? That's the reason why. So because of that process of losing all that information, because we were brainwashed in our weakened state in the beginning of the reservation, late 1800s, early 1900s, add the boarding school experience into that, where little children were tortured if they spoke about their home. This is why most people can't speak their language today, and this is why most people have short hair today. And this is why most people don't know this information that I told you in these past 15 minutes or so. So what gets left is just a partial information. And these experiences transformed our community thinking society into an individualistic thinking society. And that's how we became dualistic. So we think linear now, and we say, hey, I know more than you, so that means I'm better. You see what I mean? Or I've done more ceremonies than you, so I'm more holy than you are. You see what I mean? That's that linear thinking. That's how we got it. And it's really strong today. And there's not many people who still think in that community thinking way. And there's not many Lakota people today who have long hair. See? The long hair is essential for the Sundance ceremony. It has to be there. And even when you're in an audience, you don't have to have long hair, but for those of you that are non-native, but your hair needs to be worn loosely. You shouldn't be walking around the Sundance with a ponytail or braids. Your hair is supposed to be loose because this is a sign that you respect the ceremony that's going on. And women are supposed to be wearing long dresses. And nobody is supposed to be walking around with their shoulders exposed. Not even men are supposed to be walking around with tank tops. So these are really old protocols that nobody's meeting those today. The Moon Lodge, this is not part of the ceremony, where all the women who are having periods during that time at the location of that Sundance, they put this teepee up and they say that's the Moon Lodge. So all the women who are menstruating that day, they have to go there. Can you just imagine a tight enclosed space with 20 women in PMS? Whose bright idea was that? Obviously somebody doesn't know what menstruation involves. That means that's a man's idea. The reality is, every morning, several holy people walk through the location of the ceremony. Everybody has to be up, awake, if you're camping there, if you're just up watching. And then you come outside your teepee, and today it'd be a tent, yeah? But you stand outside, and several holy people are going to follow each other, and they're going to walk around and read everybody, kind of look everybody up and down, and they know who is having their period. And then the second one comes and verifies it. The second holy person comes and verifies it too. Because they know. They see more than we see. So they know. First they ask you to leave. And if you don't, then the security is called and you're escorted off. And you can't be anywhere near that ceremony. You have to go home. Because this ceremony involves the cycle of a man. This is the reason why. And what's happening inside a woman at menstruation, this is not a bad thing. It's an incredibly powerful thing. The power is so great because this involves creation. The power is so great that it could wipe out the power of the ceremony, the Sundance. That's why they're escorted off. So it's not because, you have a period, you're bad, get out of here, you're dirty. That's not the reason why. That's the Christian perspective there. Yeah? The Lakota perspective is when a woman is going through her period, that's a really powerful time. There's a lot of creative power is really strong during that time. So you have to be careful. So that's why they're not supposed to be at the ceremony, because the ceremony involves the cycle of a man, which a lot of people don't know about. And I'll discuss that in a few minutes here. I hope I remember to do that. Let me write that down, because sometimes I say that and then I forget. Hang on a sec. Discuss cycle of a man. Okay. With a sissy bar. Hey. No, just kidding. It's a play on words. Okay. Let's see here. So that's the reason why. So to have a moon lodge is really dangerous. It's stupid. Yeah. And so whoever came up with that concept, that shows you that as time goes on, more people are losing knowledge of these things. When I was a little boy and we went to sun dances in Rosebud and Pine Ridge, they never had a moon lodge there. Never. Even in Greengrass on Shan River Sioux Reservation, they didn't have a moon lodge there. That's a recent thing, and that's incorrect. And it's showing that people are losing knowledge, so they're making things up. This is the problem. Culture is changing too fast, and when it goes too fast, what happens is that it's losing knowledge and substituting that loss with dualistic concepts. That's what's happening. That's why the ceremony is deteriorating as time is going on. Because there's just little bit people who are actually doing this correct. Now, the next criteria that's not being met at a Sundance ceremony is Lakota language. The dancers, number one, especially the dancers, they have to have long hair. It's really important. They have to have long hair. They wear it straight, loose. And they must be fluent in Lakota. That is an absolute requirement. Today people say, well, as long as you feel Indian in your heart, that's all that matters. No, it's not. That's false. The ceremonies involve Lakota language because the songs and prayers that are made during these ceremonies, they create a certain energy in the area for that Sundance to be effective. So if everybody's doing it in English or they're pronouncing the Lakota words incorrectly, then the power's not there, rendering the ceremony ineffective, which can actually hurt the people, because when you do this improperly, you're sending out unhealthy energy, and that's going to influence others in a bad way. And those who do it, that energy is going to return to them 4 times as strong. So everybody gets fucked up. So Lakota language is absolutely required for those that are going to dance. See, this ceremony involves our outside identity, not the interior identity. The interior identity, by the way, is more important. That's the human identity. That's much, much, much more important than the tribal identity. This stuff is based on ancient information, what I'm telling you. The last Sundance I went to was in Greengrass, South Dakota, the Shan River Sioux Reservation. Maybe 2 out of 40 dancers had long hair. None of them spoke Lakota. Medicine men spoke Lakota. Just very few people that were participating in the ceremony could speak Lakota. When the guys came out of the Sundance area, when the day is over, then they go to Sweat Lodge. When they were coming out, they were all doing these macho shouting like they just completed an endurance contest. There was no humility in that. And that made me sick. And I thought, man, the Sundance, this one, is really losing everything fast. See, hardly anybody does these things anymore the way they're supposed to be done. Long hair is vital. It's not just a look. It's not a fashion statement. It's a identity statement. It's a spiritual statement. It's an emotional statement. It's important because this is the essence of your soul. So if you cut your hair short willingly, it means that you wish somebody close to you will die. You're wishing for somebody to die when you wear your hair short willingly. So in the sun dance ceremony that I just described, about 20 of these young guys, their heads were shaved. And they had gang symbols tattooed on their scalps. And I thought, this is so disgusting. They're doing the ceremony as a macho thing, and they're wishing for their close relatives to die. See, when you do the ceremony, you have to think in a Lakota perspective. And the Lakota perspective says when you cut your hair willingly and you're not in mourning, that means you're wishing for somebody to die. So as long as Lakota people keep their hair short, our language and culture is going to die. Suicide's going to always increase. Rape is always going to increase. Murder is always going to increase. All addictions are always going to increase as long as we keep our hair short. People don't realize that. It sounds like a crazy statement, but it is based on Lakota concepts. And when Indians say, David, you're crazy, that just shows you that those Indians do not think from the Lakota perspective, even though they're Lakota. They're thinking from a Western perspective. That's evidence that our culture is going to die. This is all based on Lakota Star knowledge. When people are wanting to do the ceremony, this is not something that you just say, I feel like doing that. You have to look at the criteria that has to be satisfied. So if you want to do this correctly, give yourself a few years to let your hair grow long. At the same time that your hair is growing long, that will give you time to learn the language. So when 3-4 years has gone by, you should be in pretty good shape to do this correctly. But first you humblecha. Yeah? You have to go crying for a vision. And then you ask, am I supposed to do it now? You don't do it when you feel like it, because your inner world will let you know if it's time or not. Because for every man, it's different. There's something inside of us that is different for every man. It has nothing to do with how much you know. It's not even affected by that. It's something completely different. It doesn't even have to do with emotional development or mental development or physical development. It's something completely different. When that is ready, then it's time. So for some, it might be ready when they're young. For some, it might be ready when they're a little bit older. And it's okay. It's not a race. You see, remember, if a guy says, yeah, I'm a young man, and so I'm going to do a sun dance, and then that means I'm better than the old men who are just now starting because I did it earlier. See, that's linear thinking. That's incorrect. You see what I mean with that linear thinking nonsense? So you have to humblecha, and this is a crying for a vision ceremony. It's 4 days and 4 nights. And in that ceremony, you have to do it 4 days and 4 nights, and you have to have somebody to help you. Because what's happening is you're going inside of yourself. And inside of yourself, there's passageways to other spiritual places. And some of these places are not healthy. Something could come from an unhealthy place and fool you. So a holy person has to help you, because they know how to block that for you. Because if you do it by yourself, something from these unhealthy areas could come and make you go crazy. Literally, mentally ill. So a holy person, he sits inside of a sweat lodge while you're up on the hill. And then he's watching you. His mind is connecting to your mind. So he sees what's coming into your mind from these other realms, these other spiritual places. And if something is unhealthy, he blocks it from the sweat lodge. He's protecting you. So then eventually the connection is made, and then this source tells the person if it's time or not. And like I said, it has nothing to do with your development. It has nothing to do with how much you know, or how less you know, or how good you are. It has nothing to do with that. It's something totally separate. And it's different for every man. And that's what lets them know. And you're only supposed to do it 4 years. Today, people, they make a religion out of this, and they're doing it, 27 years. And some people think that they can do it 4, take 1 year off, and do it another 4. No. In your whole life, you're only supposed to do it 4 times. Because that's all that's required. When people do it more than that, that's like eating too much sugar and getting diabetes and rotten teeth. There is no exception. Some people, they make it into a religion. I've been doing it 28 years. They're only supposed to do it 4 times, 4 consecutive years. And if somebody close to you dies during that 4 years, you have to stop and take off 1 year to mourn. Then after that year of mourning, you start all over again. Each time you do this, you get an eagle feather. Let's say you've done it 2 years now, and then your mother died. So what you're supposed to do is you give your eagle feathers back to the holy person that's helping you. Because when you do this, you have to find a helper to help you. And then they keep those feathers. So then you do your 1 year of mourning. You take half your hair, cut it off, like I said earlier. And then you mourn for 1 year. Then when that year is over, you start all over. Those 2 years are invalid now. It's not that they don't mean anything. It just means they're invalid. That doesn't mean it's bad. Okay? It's just they just don't count anymore. So then you start again. From the beginning. Because 4 represents the 4 stages of man's development. So it has to start at the beginning again. So when somebody keeps starting over because relatives keep dying, that's really unshika. That's a really tough situation. He's really in a tough situation when people keep dying because he keeps going in mourning and he has to keep starting over all the time. Sometimes that happens. Life is like that. But you cannot think in a linear way. When you're thinking a non-linear way, then it doesn't bother you. Non-linear is you go backwards and forwards at the same time. And staying in the present moment. That's the Lakota way. That's why when you learn Lakota stories, sometimes they don't follow sequence. They don't make sense. When you're a linear thinker, they don't make sense. But when you're non-linear, it makes total sense. This is really important. So the man starts all over again and continues till his 4th year is done. When his 4th year is done, that's it. That's all his life needs. And some people will say, then they go out in the hill and cry for vision again and then do it another 4 years. That's no. That violates nature. That violates the universe. That is absolutely incorrect. Because it doesn't make you better. Number one. When people do it like that, that shows that they're linear thinkers. And they're trying to find a way around it. They're trying to find a loophole. That's what lawyers do. Finding loopholes to break the rule. That's not the way it's done. That's Western thinking. When somebody says, okay, I've done my 4 years, so I'm going to go humblecha and get permission to do another 4 years. It doesn't work. That's not the way it's done. Like I said, that's somebody looking for a loophole to break the law. And this is not correct. A man's development only needs 4 times. If you do more than that, you actually are hurting it. You're hurting your own development. And that thing that's inside of you that tells you when it's time to do the ceremony, you're hurting that too. The more you do it, the more you kill yourself. That's what diabetes does. That's what spiritual diabetes does too. So you're only supposed to do it 4 times. That's ancient law. So, that is not being followed today. People think linear today, as I explained. So they think the more they do it, the more sacred they are. That's linear thinking. That is not Lakota thinking. Anciently, you only did it 4 times because that's all that was necessary. To do it more than 4 times, that's like eating one meal and then taking a shit, and then you're done taking a shit, but you stay on the toilet anyway and try to shit some more. Do you see what I mean? That doesn't make sense. And you're wasting time. And you're wasting your life. Because you're trying to be a professional shitter. You see what I mean? Do you get my drift? So, anyway, this is the way it is. That is the way it is. That's ancient. And nobody's following that today. They're killing the ceremony today because they're making up their own rules. Oh, here's another one. You're not supposed to wear glasses at the ceremony. Even if you're in the audience, you're not supposed to wear glasses. You're not supposed to take pictures and stuff like that. And I wonder if that's being violated today because smartphones can be really sneaky. One of the most disgusting things I ever seen was these American Indian movement bullshit people. They made a video in the 1970s. They were doing this protest in front of the nation's capital on the lawn. And what they did was they pierced themselves on the chest. And then what they did is they tied ropes to each other. So they were pulling away from each other. This is a gross, incredibly, one of the most asinine, stupid, absolutely stupid things I've ever seen in my life. What was missing from there? Anybody who knows the Sundance, what was missing from what I just described to you? What's missing there? Intelligence, that's obvious. A brain, that's obvious. But what's missing from there that's vital to the Sundance? The tree and the effigy of the buffalo and the man. That's an important part of the ceremony, is the tree. See? That shows you that these city Indians, these modern linear thinkers, they don't do things correctly because they don't know shit. And what they did was just hurt the people. That's one of the stupidest things I ever saw. It was a 2-hour Sundance, I think it was. It's supposed to be 12 days long because there's 4 days of preparation where the dancers separate from the families, and then after the dance, there's another 4 days of conclusion where they still separate from the family, and on the last day of conclusion, they return to the family. It's a 12-day thing altogether for the dancers. And they did it in 2 hours. See, this is stupid, yeah? This shows you that not all Indians are smart. And this American Indian movement thing, this just ruins everything. I went to an AIM Sundance in the Rosebud Sioux Reservation back in the 70s, and that was probably the worst Sundance I've ever been to. People were walking around with machine guns, which means they were illegal, because machine gun is fully automatic. In America, that's illegal. You can only have semi-automatic for non-military people. And the guys were showing off their chests where they got pierced. They were walking around bare-chested, and girls were walking around in mini skirts and showing cleavage, and there's a lot of drug usage that was happening, and that was totally missing the point. That was the worst one I've ever witnessed in my life. So it goes to show you that people are really losing the original way. And the original way of sun dancing, you pierce so that you're totally covered in blood from the neck down. It's like you're wearing red shirt and red pants and red shoes because you're soaked in blood. That's the true Sundance way. This is a representation. It's a sacred thing. It's your role in procreation. How many men do you think can really do this today? Today they just pierce under the thin layer of skin and break away like nothing, bleed a little bit, and they think they've completed it. But in the ancient way, you were just totally crimson blood all over your body. That shows you that you were pierced deeply. See what I mean? Things are really different today. People are taking the easy way out. They want to make everything easy for themselves. On Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation, and there was a family. I won't say their last name, but they are in South Dakota. And when I was, I don't know, maybe in my, about 20 years ago or so, they started doing their own sun dance. It's a really big family. And they would say, yeah, we do ours correct, and everybody else does theirs wrong. And I was like, okay, that kind of sounds funny to me. But what used to really bother me is that one of the guys in that family, the guy was drunk just about every day, it seemed like. And every time I saw him, he was drunk. He's really a hellraiser, yeah? And he's racist to the max. When he gets drunk, he walks through the white neighborhood of town, and he calls on anybody to fight. Any white man. He calls on all the white men to fight. And they just call the tribal cops and throw him in jail, yeah, because it's stupid. And anytime he's with a woman, he's always beating her up. His mother backs him up. Yeah? His mother will say, yeah, that woman's no good, and she deserved what she got. And how can a woman say that about another woman? That means something's wrong with the mom, in my opinion. And one time, that other woman was my cousin. And in the Lakota way, she was my sister, because her mother and my mother were first cousins because their fathers were brothers. So that means my mother and her mother in the Teoshpai Lakota way were sisters, which means her and I were brother and sister, because in that Teoshpai way, it keeps going like that. So we really took offense when this abusive guy, when his mother said, yeah, so-and-so got what she deserved. She's really a no-good woman. She's just a whore. My mom said, be quiet. You're talking about my daughter. I don't appreciate that. And so that lady just shut up really fast. Because my mother is really respected in the community because she's a teacher of many generations. Everybody knows my mom. And so this lady that was saying this, the mother of the abuser, I'm going to give her a name so you know who I'm talking about. I'm going to call her Helen. Helen had about 12 kids. And she never took care of her kids. She would always take off from her husband and get drunk. She'd go on with anybody. She'd be gone for months. She gets pregnant, and then she'll come back to her husband, and stay with him until she has the baby. As soon as she has the baby, she takes off again. 9 months later, it's the same thing. She never raised any of her children. Who's the whore here? And what kind of wife is this that does this to her husband? Her husband must have really had low self-esteem because he never left her. He always would take her back every time. And so that's why my mom said, she told her to be quiet. Who are you to talk? She said. Helen wasn't even a mother to her own children. She turned down motherhood. She spread her legs for any man, but she turned down motherhood. This is the truth. I'm not backstabbing. This is the absolute truth. This family was saying they're going to have their own Sundance because they do everything right. Do you see the logic here? It doesn't make sense. And so this guy, he would be getting drunk all the time. It's Helen's son. And when Sundance comes, he's holier than thou. He does the Sundance. Holier than thou. Day after the Sundance, he's back in Dupree. What do you think he's doing? He's drunk, walking the streets again, calling out all the white people to fight. So 360 days of the year, he's a racist and drunk and beating up his girlfriends. But for 5 days, because the modern Sundance is 5 days, first day being tree day, and then the other 4 days are the days of the dancing. So for 5 days, he's holier than thou. And it just keeps going like that. How can you be a racist and do this ceremony? How can you hit women and do this ceremony? This is doing it right? So what this was telling me was that for 5 days he was a good man, and for 361 days he was a bad man. In my opinion, he's a bad man. I think that 361 days kind of outweighs the 5 days a tiny little bit. You catch my drift? This is how a lot of men are on the res. They really know how to impress girls. They're charming. Once they have one, they get tired of them fast because they just want them for sex. And then next thing you know, he's cheating on you or he's beating you up. I'm not saying all Indian guys are like this. There's good Indian guys. But on the res, there's a lot of deceiving guys there. And they do this dance just to impress. So with this guy that I'm talking about here, I mean, there's a lot of them do this. Shit, I know one who used to, he had a radio show on Blog Talk, and he would go on and on about how much he hates white people, and he's a musician. He even wrote a song called Wacipi, Go Home. Wacipi means white people. And Indian racists, they use the term Wacipi as if it was a derogatory term, like the N-word for talking about black people. But this is not a derogatory term. Wacipi is just a term signifying white people, and it's nothing bad. But these Indian racists use it as a racist term. So they're ruining the language. They can't even speak Lakota, and whatever they know, they use it in a hateful way. And what's really stupid is that this guy is married to a lady from Austria, and he has a kid who's half white. And yet he talks about hating white people. And he does a Sundance 29 years in a row. You see what I mean? This whole dualistic, linear thinking that a lot of Indians today think like. This is really a problem. And this is becoming a dogmatic, dualistic religion now. It's just, you might as well go to church, because they're turning the Sundance into a church now. It's becoming routine for some people. It's losing its meaning. People are doing it for selfish reasons now. So when you walk into a Sundance location and ask Where's the Moon Lodge? And they tell you where it's at. Just get back in your car and go, because that's not part of it at all. Any Sundance that has a Moon Lodge in it, that's clear evidence that this is not traditional. It's not ancient. You see somebody walking around with braided hair, and that's also a violation. And all these kind of things. There's so many protocols that people are just not following today. Instead, people are making their own things up. It's really, really becoming a circus. And now you have a lot of non-native people going there, and there's a guy on Rosebud and several on Pine Ridge where they cater mainly to non-native people. And these people usually have paid an immense amount of money to do the ceremony. And it's just a circus. It's really become a circus. Just imagine going to the Vatican and then setting up carnival rides and freak show displays and stripper displays and circus clowns running all over the place and these mimes and people walking around in funny costumes and have all that going around the Vatican. That's what's happening to today's Sundances. It's really, really become racist as well. Some people will say, we don't want any Europeans here. We don't want any white people here. You black people, get out of here too. Oh, you Chinese people, go squint your eyes somewhere else. They really get racist today in the Sundance. That's all duality. Duality does not belong in any ceremony unless the organization is an organization of hate, which is what the Sundance is starting to become. Do you see what I mean now? That's where it's heading. So it breaks my heart because this is signifying that the culture is dying really fast. Nobody is speaking the language. And there's no excuse for that today. The opportunities on the reservation is there, but they don't take it. That's sad when Indians don't even want to try to learn their own language. That's really sad. There's really an incorrect belief that a lot of young people have concerning the Sundance. Some people who are not Lakota, they believe that when they do the Sundance, that their DNA magically transforms the DNA. So they'll say, yeah, I did the Sundance for 4 years, so now I'm Lakota. That's false. Absolutely false. This is just fantasy thinking. And this is a dualistic concept because it means they're ashamed of who they are and they want to be something else. And that means they have low self-esteem and they need outside validation. They have insecurity issues. They have inferiority complex, so they feel that they need to be somebody else. They're hiding from themselves is what they're doing. And if you're hiding from yourself, then you're really lost. The Sundance doesn't make you Lakota. And when people think like this, they're dualistic because they think that being Lakota is better than being anything else. So they put Lakota high up on the pedestal, and they want to be that. And that's really, really unhealthy, and it's wrong. Because that's not the way the earth sees us. She sees us as her grandchildren. She doesn't see us as Lakota or German or Japanese. She sees us as Ikje, Wichasha, if you're a man, or Ikje Wiwanyang, if you're a woman. So the Sundance is not about that. People who do this because they think it makes them Lakota, those kind of people really have a problem. That's a major problem, and those people need therapy because they've lost their senses. They've lost common sense. Just recently, a guy contacted me from England, and he said that he wanted to do a Hamblecha ceremony in the Lakota way because he believes that he's Lakota and not white. And so he said, he was born in the wrong skin. And so he said that he wanted to do this Hamblecha ceremony somewhere in America, Montana or Canada or whatever. And he wanted to verify. Yeah? And he made a lot of lies up because the things he said do not go correctly in Lakota thinking. So I know he's lying. And he wanted to do this ceremony because he felt that after he comes down from the hill, the Hamblecha ceremony, he felt that after that he will be officially Lakota. See, this is a really good example. This guy is probably in his 60s. And he said that he has both of my books, my language book and my spirituality book. And he was talking about fantasies like this. So I responded to him and I said, if you really do have my book, then you should know that in the Lakota Star Knowledge, there are no mistakes. When you're born on the earth, there are no mistakes. So you're not born in the wrong skin. So he wrote back and he said, well, I admit I didn't read it, he said. At least he was that honest to say that he didn't read the book. People who want to be Lakota, they'll do things like, there's another ceremony that we have called Hunka. This is when a Lakota person makes a non-Lakota person a relative. But that's where it ends. That adopted person is not Lakota. The ceremony does not make them Lakota. It makes them a relative. There's a guy from the Yankton Sioux reservation, and he's friends with a guy here in Berlin. Well, the guy's dead now. The guy in Berlin, he's dead now, but he's a white guy, a white American who lived in Germany for quite some time. He's a well-known musician in Germany. Anyway, this Pete Wyoming Bender, that's his name. He's a white guy, and this Dakota guy adopted him. They did a Hunka ceremony where they became brothers. And after that, this Mr. Bender, he considered himself a Dakota, which is false. The ceremony does not make you Lakota or Dakota or Nakota. You're still who you are. All it does is it makes you a relative. If it really did make you Lakota, then it would take way more than a Hunka ceremony to do that. And that's not possible. That's like making a tree into a zebra. That's not going to happen. So this showed me this Mr. Bender has self-esteem issues, that he has inferiority complex. So my guess is that Mr. Bender was a very violent man because he didn't like himself. So he took his anger out on others around him. And so he wanted to become Indian. So he felt that was the cure to his problems. And it's not. So again, this doing any Lakota ceremony does not make you Lakota. And being Lakota does not make us better than anybody else. Our ancestors never called themselves Lakota. They said Ikje Wichasha for men and Ikje Wiwanyang for women. That's the way it works. That's what's more important, because that's the way the earth sees us. Now remember what I said, Sundance. This concerns the exterior identity. The human identity is designed to nurture this earth. And that's inside of you, your sacred center. So the most important thing is not the ceremony that you do, and it's not how many ceremonies that you do. It's not important that you have a sacred item or how many. The most important ceremony is your life and how you live it. And you are the most sacred object. And that's all that matters to the earth. So that's all that should matter to you too. Okay? Life is really a non-linear thing. Sometimes we have to go in our past to come to peace with it. But when we come to peace with it, we learn. We learn something new because we changed and we can see more. We're more open to things. And even after we've come to peace with our past, we can still look in our past from time to time. Because as we learn more, we see more. We're able to comprehend more. So going into the past, you're going to see things there that you didn't see before. They always were there, but you've changed. You've grown. You've developed more. So now you can see more. So you can go in your past and look at things again, and you'll see new things, and you'll learn new things again. That's non-linear. You're going backwards, and it's okay. Another way is to jump in the future and visualize how you would like your life to be and act like it's already there. You do this a few minutes every day. And what's happening is that this visualization is putting something in your brain that's going to influence you to receive knowledge and wisdom. And that's learning from the future. You see? Then you come back to the present moment and continue on. You always come back to the present moment because the present moment is the most important moment, which means the present life is the most important. What you are right now, you are human. That's the most important thing.